the week has been filled with Habs fans bidding a fond farewell to Jeff Petry and his family. All right, now who's next? Welcome, friends. We're so glad to have you back here at Habs Hockey Report on All Habs Hockey Magazine's YouTube channel, part of Rocket Sports Media. What a week it's been yet again. This summer has been week upon week upon week of hockey news coming out of Montreal, and I'm very excited to bring you another great show today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, lots of information to cover. Last week's show was another big hit, and I want to say a special thank you to a couple of people who we had a lot of great comments, not necessarily even just on the content of the show, but the show itself last week. We see Rajan here saying, 6 minutes in, I enjoy it, complete infos, everything we want to know. Thanks. And we also have another comment from Lizard King 89 here saying, love the show, just subbed. Thank you so much. We appreciate your subscription, your viewership, and if you are relatively new to the channel, new to the show, why don't you do the same thing? Why don't you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell? We're here with you every Thursday, bringing you the latest on the Habs, the Laval Rocket, and prospects, and we don't want you to miss a single week. Also, let us know where you're watching from. We've got fans who are watching all over the world, literally, as far away as New Zealand, so and of course all over North America as well. So let us know where you're watching from. Drop that in the comment section down below, right down there. And also, while you're down there, leave an answer to this week's feedback forum question, which is about that Jeff Petry trade. Are you satisfied with it? Do you like what they packaged out, and do you like what Kent Hughes got in return? We're going to talk about that trade in more detail in the next segment. So let's get started. The title of this segment is right this week, Habs Happenings. The Habs had a lot happening this week, that's for sure. And of course, the marquee event that happened in this past week came late in the kind of mid-afternoon on Saturday, was the announcement that yes, indeed, Jeff Petry had been traded away from the Montreal Canadiens. So the package, in case you missed it, Jeff Petry and Ryan Poehling shipped off to the Pittsburgh Penguins in return for defenseman Mike Matheson and a fourth-round draft pick in 2023. So there's kind of a lot to break down with that. We've said all along Petry's contract was one that needed to get traded away, despite the fact that Jeff Petry had even requested a trade. Whether he had requested a trade or not, Petry's contract was one that needed to get off the books in Montreal. So for me, happy to see that Jeff Petry's traded. I think Pittsburgh's a good fit for him. Ryan Poehling is another one of those, as I said, you would have liked to have been able to see them keep Alexander Romanov around. Ryan Poehling's another one that I think, could have. That's a prospect. That's another one of your first rounders. Here's a hint. The Habs now have, from 2018 and earlier, the only person left on the roster who was a first round draft selection by the Canadiens prior to 2018 is Carey Price. That's a long time and a long list of first rounders who are no longer with the organization because they were either bad picks or their development was mishandled and they didn't achieve their true potential in their development time with Montreal. A bulk of them have either been traded away, just let go, or have been mishandled in their development. So with Ryan Poehling gone, that's another one. So now Carey Price, the only one before 2018 who's a first round draft selection. And Paling made good strides last year. He finally really stuck in the NHL. He was starting to finally get comfortable. He was starting to contribute. Again, not every prospect is going to come in and be a Cole Caulfield or a Nick Suzuki or, an Arturi Lehkonen. Not every one of them is going to be a top 6 guy who's flashy, who scores a ton of goals. You also need solid bottom 6 forwards as well, guys who are responsible defensively, guys that you can rely on in different situations, guys that can use a little bit of physicality as well. And Ryan Paling was really well suited for maybe a third line role, and he was starting to really come into that. We wish him nothing but the best. We've had great experiences covering Ryan Paling, interviewing him over the years, ever since he was drafted, even when he was playing for USA Hockey. And so we wish him nothing but the best. It's a decent package out of Ryan Paling and Jeff Petry. And you're going to hear, too, Kent Hughes talked about how with acquiring Kirby Dach, they felt that they had enough depth at center that they were they felt a little bit better about being able to let Ryan Paling go because of Dach coming in. The return. So you get a Mike Matheson, another defenseman, back in return. Matheson, of course, is a hometown guy. Everyone has been, really hammering on that he's from the West Island. Said in his media availability, Saku Koivu was he and his family's favorite Canadian growing up, as they all watched the Montreal Canadiens. It's not actually as much of a cap shed as you would have maybe liked to have seen. That's not to say that Mike Matheson isn't going to be a quality defenseman. And Kent Hughes, you're going to hear him in a minute, said that, there had to be a defenseman coming back. It's just that he's got term as well. He's a little bit cheaper than Jeff Petry, but he's also got term, which Kent Hughes doesn't seem to be too concerned with the term portion of it because he sees other contracts expiring in future years where he's not going to have to worry about that cap. But for right now, it only shores up a little bit of cap space for him. So as I just mentioned, we were going to hear from Kent Hughes. Let's hear from both Kent Hughes and Mike Matheson himself. We'll hear first from Kent Hughes about the trade and about acquiring Mike Matheson, and then we'll hear from Mike Matheson about what it means to him to come to Montreal.
That the tricky part in today's National Hockey League is to have the cap space to be able to do that and be able to move the money. A player like Jeff Petry at his age with his contract is typically going to go to a team trying to compete for a Stanley Cup. It's difficult for those teams to take money on without money coming back. And Mike Matheson is a defenseman who was playing top 4 minutes in Pittsburgh that brings a lot of the qualities that we lose in a Jeff Petry in terms of his ability to transport the puck. I think if you look, we were checking yesterday, I think last season Mike was in the 90th percentile for goals in the National Hockey League 5-on-5 per 60 minutes. I think he feel really comfortable that Mike is the kind of person in our locker room at this point in his career who can assist our young players, be it the draft picks like a Juraj Slafkovsky or a young defenseman that are trying to make their way as regular NHL players. I think Mike is a 5-star human being who can be of great assistance to our club and helping our young players.
I grew up in Montreal, obviously, in the West Island, learned how to play hockey watching Montreal Canadiens games, and was a huge fan. Our whole family would sit down and watch every game. So to think that I'll be able to pull on that sweater and play in the Bell Center every night is really special. It's a crazy feeling, and it's pretty hard to describe. It almost feels surreal. Defensively, I like having a tight gap and using my skating to make it difficult for players to be coming through the neutral zone. I think I had a lot of success or more success in Pittsburgh because of that. And we'll definitely want to carry that over to Montreal here and continue to improve as well. Obviously, I have more growing to do, and I'm excited for the
Now, the one thing that this move did allow Kent Hughes to do was to sign a new contract, and that went to Rem Pitlick, surprisingly enough. A 2-year deal for Rem Pitlick. And now you think, okay, well, he was an RFA, but they didn't qualify him. Well, the reason they didn't qualify him was they felt that there was the possibility that Rem Pitlick could elect arbitration. And with how tight the cap is for Montreal right now, they were afraid that they weren't going to be able to afford the salary that the arbitrators settled on. So instead, they elected not to qualify him, let him go to market, and then once the trade of Petry happened, they had some cap space, and then they could offer him a contract on their terms at their price. And Rem Pitlick obviously was fine with that. So okay, maybe money wise that might be an ideal thing. And Rem Pitlick had a an admirable year last year. He did a serviceable job last year, and fans seem to like him as well. My concern is, as we're looking at development of prospects, and we see a lot of prospects coming into the system at the AHL level and kind of on the bubble AHL, NHL, who are going to compete for roster spots at camp come September. And if this team is in a rebuild, development is going to be a huge key for this team over the next 2 to 3 years. And so signing a guy like Rem Pitlick, who isn't really adding anything to the future of your organization, but is he taking a place of a potential prospect who could be working towards the future of your organization to get some better experience at the NHL level? I'm thinking in terms of like a Jesse Ylönen, who is right on the cusp. Of anybody who played in Laval last year, Jesse Ylönen is probably the guy who has the best shot at really making an impression at camp. But if you've got guys like Rem Pitlick now in the way, is that less likely to happen? And so those are things to watch out for as, we're hoping that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are going to follow their word, and that the page is really going to turn for the Montreal Canadiens organization in terms of focusing on development and making it a priority and transitioning that developing game from the AHL to an effective role in the NHL. So that's something, of course, to keep an eye on. Rem Pitlick signed for 2 years, a one-way contract, $1.1 million per year. Last year in 46 games, he had 9 goals, 17 assists. So as I said, serviceable. But for me, I look kind of at the bigger picture of what that means for a potential prospect, and is he taking a position that a prospect could be getting some experience from? We're going to have to wait and see how training camp shakes out. Also, another contract signed this week. Goaltender Sam Montembeault signed. The term surprised me on this one. It's a one-way deal, but it's a 2-year one-way deal, which I find a little surprising. But it also gives you an indication that they probably also believe, and rightly so, that Cayden Primo is still another year or more away from really taking an NHL backup role. It's a good indicator that Cayden Primo will spend the season in Laval, which is what he needs. You saw he's had a tumultuous couple of seasons with the constant back and forth between Montreal and Laval, never getting settled into a groove, losing his confidence, things go terribly awry, and then it takes him a long time to kind of rebuild and get his footing again. However, when he finally settled into a groove in the playoffs for Laval, you saw that he started to gain his confidence, it grew, and his play got significantly better. And so obviously the goal is, and many people have said it, not just me, not just us here at Rocket Sports, but even his goaltending tandem partner, Kevin Poulin, JF Uhl, other goaltending experts have said that he needs to spend a lot of time dominating in the AHL, and it looks like that's what's going to happen. So for that reason, I'm okay with the Sam Montembeault signing. I just would have liked to have seen it at a 1-year deal right now, not giving him the 2-year term. Because really the key here is that there are so many question marks surrounding the Montreal Canadiens NHL goaltending situation for this coming season. Will Carey Price be healthy enough to play? Now, Stefan Waite, his former goaltending coach, made an appearance on TSN 690 this week saying that he believes that Carey Price will be ready to go for September. We'll take that for what it's worth. Stefan Waite does keep in touch with him. He believes Carey Price will be ready to go, but really it's going to be Carey Price who determines that, and Carey Price's knee that determines that. Whether or not Carey Price is healthy, will Jake Allen still be a Montreal Canadien come September? The goaltending market in free agency this summer is hotter than it's been in years, and goaltenders are getting a ton of money, and a lot of teams are looking for them. And so it is quite possible that we see Jake Allen packaged out before the end of the summer. So with those two things in question, will Carey Price be healthy enough to play, and will Jake Allen actually be there to be his backup or the starting goaltender for the Canadiens if Carey Price isn't healthy, are two variables that the answers aren't known yet for Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. And so naturally you sign a guy like Sam Montembeault. He's either going to be your third goaltender in case of injuries or so forth, so that they don't have to call Caden Primo up from Laval, or he's going to be backing up either Carey Price or Jake Allen if one of the two of them is not available or around to play. So very interesting. It's a good insurance policy, I suppose. I just would have liked to have seen it for 1 year and not two. We know that there has to be more moves. And that's why I said at the top of the show, who's next? There has to be someone else who's next because they're still over the cap. So at least, I would like to see Jonathan Drouin's contract moved out. To be quite honest, I know he's a fan favorite, but Brendan Gallagher's contract is a big one. And there's a lot of term left on it. And so you have to kind of weigh that. Is anybody now? I don't know how much of a market there is for Brendan Gallagher right now. So he might not move out, but Jonathan Drouin definitely could be moved out. I'm sure Kent Hughes is taking calls on Jake Allen. We know that Josh Anderson has been out there as a name on the trading block as well. So there will be more moves to happen. We'll bring them to you as they come, because this summer is not going quietly. Well, things are continuing to heat up for the Laval Rocket as well. Hey, home opener announced already. Can you believe that? The Laval Rocket will open their 2022-23 season on the AHL opening night, which is Friday, October 14th. Laval will open the season at home against Belleville. It's actually a home-and-home weekend for them, even though the full schedule for the AHL isn't going to be out until later in the day here on Thursday. We do also see that Belleville's home opener is the following night, Saturday, October 15th, against Laval. So naturally we can deduce that Laval has a home and home that opening weekend, Friday, Saturday, hosting Belleville on Friday, traveling to the Belleville Sens on Saturday. So it's really coming. It really is. We also have a pretty clear picture as to how the Laval roster might be shaping up. Really, the variable now is just not knowing exactly who is going to make the Canadiens roster come training camp and who is going to start the season in Laval. For a really deep look at all of the options available to Laval this season and how much it has changed or hasn't, invite you to click this link right here and listen to this week's episode of our Press Zone podcast hosted by myself and our editor-in-chief, Rick Stevens. We take a very deep look at everyone available for the Laval Rocket, all of the new contracts that have been signed, and we talk about managing expectations. I mentioned in the last segment talking about needing to see a shift towards development and room for prospects. Well, that is, at least for me, is starting to be a bit of a concern with seeing the signings that Laval has been doing. There are a lot of prospects available to Laval in the fall, but there's been a lot of other alternate signings as well. So for the details on all of that, really deep dive on it, just click that link, check out this week's episode of the Press Zone podcast. I guarantee it's going to be an interesting listen for you. So we will just quickly here run down the newest contracts that were signed by Laval this past week. A couple of goaltenders got 1 year, two-way AHL contracts, which indicates that they will likely play a bulk of the season in Trois-Rivières in the ECHL. And that's goaltenders Philippe DeRosier, who was with Trois-Rivières last year, and Habs goaltending prospect Joe Vrbetic. Joe Vrbetic was a 7th-round draft pick in 2021. We actually, on the Press Zone podcast last year, after he was drafted, had an interview with his parents on the Press Zone podcast. You're welcome to search for that in our archive at thepresszone.fm if you'd like to hear that. Joe Vrbetic has spent the last couple of years minding the net in the OHL for the North Bay Battalion. He comes on with a 1-year, 2-way contract, so hopefully he's going to also get a little bit of AHL time since he is a goaltending prospect for the Canadiens. Goaltenders take the longest to develop, and hopefully he gets a little bit of AHL experience this year as well to really start that process for him. Another goaltender signed, Kevin Poulin, is back for Laval on a 1-year, 1-way contract, so it looks like the tandem will be Caden Primo and Kevin Poulin again. Caden Primo, should mention, the only goaltender who has not re-signed a contract yet. He's been extended a qualifying offer, but he has not signed a contract yet. We're still waiting on that. So the only difference I'd say that we want to see out of the Poulin and Primo tandem this year in Laval is that instead of it being a pretty 50-50 split like they did last year, we'd like to see Caden Primo getting the bulk of the starts. Kevin Poulin needs to really play a strict backup role so that Caden Primo has a solid year of development, kind of owning the crease, owning the net, getting a lot of ice time, back-to-backs, and really getting that endurance game going and getting him prepared for hopefully an eventual transition to the NHL. Also, another 1-year, 2-way contract at the AHL level, Emile Poirier. Forward will likely spend a good portion of his time with Trois-Rivières. He's, those kinds of contracts means those guys are call-up options when there are the inevitable injuries in Laval, or call-ups to the NHL, which leave holes. So that's really the purpose of a 2-way contract at the AHL level. New defenseman coming on, Alex Green signed a 1-year, 1-way AHL contract. He comes from the Tampa Bay organization, which has a great history in developing guys. And so again, there's going to be a good slate of prospects on the back end. Captain Xavier Ouellet not back. He has since signed elsewhere. Tori Dello will be back. We'll probably see Madison Bowie there, but we don't know which of the prospects. Caden Gooley, there's a good chance Caden Gooley might make the NHL roster, so he wouldn't be available in Laval. So just a little bit of insurance there, another defenseman. And Gabriel Bourque is back. A fan favorite, of course, last year on a 1-year, 1-way contract. He's been re-signed. This is just another one of those returning contracts that really didn't need to be signed, but you're giving the fans a fan favorite. You're bringing, a presence who was there last year, some stability, that kind of thing. As long as it doesn't interfere with development and as long as the ice time goes to the prospects, I'll be okay with that. But it's a wait and see kind of thing. Lots still to come for the Laval Rocket. I guarantee there's going to be some more signings, even though they are bursting at the seams already as far as contracts. But we'll keep an eye on it for you as we start to tick down. Can you believe it? To training camp? It's just over a month away. We'll have you covered. It is Habs Fan Hub time. You know what? If you're new to the show, this is a segment that we have each and every week, and it's really your chance as fans to weigh in on your favorite hockey team. Whether it's the Canadiens, whether it's Laval, whether it's talking about hockey and prospects in general. Oh, you know what? If you've got a question about any of those things, the All Habs mailbag is always open. Just drop your question down in the comments section below. We'll toss it in the All Habs mailbag, and I'll be happy to answer it on a future show if you have any questions at all about anything going on with the Canadiens. August tends to be kind of a slower news cycle in terms of the hockey world. It's kind of the quiet before the storm. So August for us is going to be a bit of fan appreciation month. So be sure you watch next week's show. Going to give you some indications on some calls to action to you, our viewers, ways that you can interact and get involved with the show in the month of August. Also keep an eye on our community tab. There will be posts that happen there as well, inviting you to submit some things for us to share throughout the month of August. Don't forget, my question for the week, the feedback forum question, is all about that Jeff Petry trade. What are your thoughts on it? Are you happy with what was packaged out of Montreal, Petry and Paling, and are you happy with what Kent Hughes got in return in Matheson and a fourth rounder in next year's draft? So drop those answers down below. We'll read them next week on the show. Last week, we talked about, the question was basically, were you satisfied with how quiet the Canadiens were in free agency in the first, 48 hours or so of free agency? We had some great responses. Dino here says, free agency, well, not really too surprised. Waiting for one signing, the coming home of our adopted son, Pernell Carl, CH76, where he belongs, where he was destined to be. Dino, thank you so much. Dino is a very loyal reader and listener of our podcasts and viewer here at Habs Hockey Report. And Dino is unapologetically a very big PK Subban fan. And the funny thing is, PK's agent made it known that Subban still wants to play hockey next year, that they're open to options. They're talking with some clubs. So, of course, that means the rumor mill in Montreal has started. Will PK Subban return to Montreal? Fans have a love-hate relationship with PK Subban. And quite frankly, his production has slid way off the charts in recent years. So I don't see PK Subban as being a viable option for the Montreal Canadiens, but Dino, I appreciate your passion and your loyalty to one of your favorite players. Michael Spinella says the lack of free agency signings by Montreal is a good thing. They don't have the cap space to bring anyone in, and they shouldn't be trying to make a big splash during the first offseason of a rebuild. Michael, I agree with you. That's kind of right along what I just said. No need to make a big splash equals, you don't have to go out after big, flashy names. It is a rebuild. The focus needs to be on the long-term future of the organization and getting back to winning a Stanley Cup. And if that's kind of a 5-year window that they want to get back to being a contender, then yeah, you need to be focusing on the details, the smaller details, and you need to be focusing on development in your prospects. Great answer. Thanks for your comment. Finally, then we have Dave, who says the Habs free agency snooze fest was to be expected with their cap situation. I believe Hughes has an eye on a couple UFAs, non-high profile, non-expensive, short term, only if he could move some players out like Petry, Dvorak, etc. to provide cap space. And of course, we then saw Petry get moved out. The Carey Price uncertainty is definitely stalling any potential moves Montreal can or cannot do, but Montreal is in a position that they don't need to rush their rebuild process. And I really have to agree with you there, Dave. A rebuild is a lengthy prospect. This is not something that's going to flip the switch in a year or two. I don't expect the Habs to make the playoffs again this year, and that's okay. As long as they're making the moves and taking the right steps to develop their prospects and build a team that 3, 4, 5 years from now can really start to contend, like the Rangers, like basically what Jeff Gorton did with the Rangers in this same kind of situation. So it will be a fascinating thing to watch to see how all of this unfolds. Training camp is going to be a vital key for all of us watching to see what direction this rebuild is really going to take for this first year when we see what the roster shapes up to be. And we're going to keep an eye on all of that. If you happen to miss last week's show where we started to talk about free agency and things like that, check that out right here, and you can bet we'll be back next Thursday on Habs Hockey Report.